I know when we think about the natural world, we usually just assume that the drive to mate is all about harmony, partnership, and, well, creating new life. I mean, it's supposed to be the ultimate biological imperative, right? But what if the very act meant to ensure a species' future is exactly what causes its downfall? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're completely challenging that peaceful assumption and diving into the dark, hidden side of biology, where reproduction doesn't actually guarantee life, it threatens survival.
Okay, let's dive right into this and map out where we're headed. We'll start by exploring the dark side of biology, zoom way in on microscopic mating warfare, and then examine deadly seal interactions, coercion in the Outback, and the fatal mating ball, before we finally calculate the ultimate cost of survival. Starting with Section 1, the dark side of biology, specifically looking at when reproduction threatens survival. To really understand the extreme behaviors we're about to see, we need to introduce a totally crucial overarching concept: sexual conflict. Think of this as a relentless evolutionary arms race between males and females. It leads to aggressive, truly bizarre, and sometimes completely fatal mating strategies. This is the scientific framework anchoring everything we're going to explore today. See, the natural world's drive for the next generation just isn't always the cooperative, beautiful process we see in nature documentaries. The male and female of a species don't always share the exact same biological goals, and when those underlying goals clash, well, evolution gets pretty brutal. Moving on to Section 2, Microscopic Mating Warfare, featuring seed beetles and bedbugs. Let's look at our first tiny subjects, where this war of the sexes is a literal physical reality, written directly into their anatomy. We're starting with a massive physical mismatch in the seed beetle. Male seed beetles possess genitalia armed with these heavily sclerotized, incredibly sharp spines. During copulation, these spines physically penetrate the wall of the female's copulatory duct. Biologists have actually found that the spinier the male, the more successful he is. Those spines act like microscopic anchors, so the female literally cannot shake him off, leaving behind visible melanized scars. So to survive this severe physical trauma, the females are forced into a physiological arms race, constantly evolving thicker, far more robust copulatory tracts just to survive the encounter. So that begs a rather dark, unavoidable question, doesn't it? What happens when the male's weaponry evolves faster and fundamentally outpaces the female's ability to resist and survive? What happens when this microscopic arms race reaches its breaking point? Well, the result, ironically, is absolutely catastrophic for the species. High injury rates from these encounters lead to vastly depressed population fitness. In extreme cases, in this totally blind drive to pass on their own genes, these hyperaggressive males can literally drive their entire species to extinction. They end up killing off the very females they fundamentally need to survive. It becomes this bizarre evolutionary dead end where the aggression spiral utterly destroys the population it was meant to sustain. Speaking of traumatic microscopic encounters, let's talk about a household nightmare: the bedbug. Bedbugs use a violent mode of copulation, known quite literally in the scientific community as traumatic insemination. The male completely and violently bypasses the female's natural reproductive tract entirely. Instead, he uses sheer force to pierce her abdominal wall, ejaculating directly into her internal body cavity known as the hemocoel. Yeah, it's as intense as it sounds. This kind of intense coercion forces some seriously extreme anatomical adaptations. The male uses a highly specialized needle-like organ called the perimere to actually pierce the female's exoskeleton. Because this constant puncturing drastically reduces the female's lifespan and carries massive, often lethal infection risks, she's actually evolved a highly specialized trauma management organ known as the mesospermolage. It exists for literally no other reason than to manage the wounding and stave off the infections caused by mating. Survival for the female is traded completely for the male's competitive biological advantage. All right, Section 3, Deadly Seal Interactions, looking at the huge size disparity in the Wadden Sea. We're scaling things way up now, to marine mammals, specifically looking at interactions off the coast of Germany in the Wadden Sea. The crucial point here is that we are looking at interspecific fatalities, meaning this violence crosses the boundary between entirely different species. While males normally focus their aggression on their own kind, researchers have found young male gray seals forcing sexual interactions with adult female harbor seals. This is entirely driven by an overpowering, inescapable disparity in size and weight.
the massive male gray seal is simply too large for the smaller female harbor seal to fend off or escape. 12. That is the number of centimeters in length that these vaginal and uterine lacerations can reach. Just pause and think about that scale. Researchers have thoroughly documented the severe physical trauma resulting from these forced cross-species interactions, and the internal damage is absolutely massive for the female seal. The grim medical reality of these lacerations is just relentlessly bleak. This extreme trauma almost always leads to fatal septicemia, which is a massive, overwhelming bacterial infection in the bloodstream. If the female harbor seal happens to be pregnant during the attack, the encounter frequently leads to forced abortions. Ultimately, the sheer disparity in size, the crushing weight of the mounting bull, and the resulting traumatic wounds create completely impossible survival odds for the female. Let's move to Section 4, Coercion in the Outback, featuring the Lake Eyre Dragon. From the ocean, we're heading over to the harsh salt lakes of Australia to analyze a reptile whose entire mating strategy relies on extreme behavioral coercion. Male dragons take playing rough to a distinctly lethal level. Their highly aggressive tactics include persistent, exhausting chasing across the salt flats, actively biting the females specifically on the head and neck to subdue them, and forcing them into this strict mating grasp. Once they have this unyielding hold, the larger males force intromission. These interactions are so incredibly fierce and relentless that they regularly result in serious physical injury and, honestly, quite often, a painful death for the female dragon. So how does the female possibly fight back against this kind of assault? Her primary defense mechanism is totally behavioral. She flips entirely onto her back to expose a bright, vibrant orange coloration on her belly. This is an unmistakable visual signal to say no. It clearly tells the male that she is not receptive and is absolutely willing to fight. But the tragic reality of this sexual conflict is that despite this clear and aggressive signal, the male's sheer persistence, aggression, and size often overpower her anyway. Let's see how this builds as we hit Section 5, the fatal mating ball of the European common frog. This brings us to a really explosive, chaotic climax. We're now looking at the frenzied reality of the European common frog's breeding season. Competition among male common frogs is so incredibly intense, it creates a highly dangerous phenomenon known as the mating ball. During the desperate scramble to fertilize a female's eggs, multiple males will simultaneously cling to a single female in the water. Driven entirely by instinct, they absolutely refuse to let go. The sheer combined weight and the relentless physical pressure of these unwanted males turns what should be a simple reproductive process into a suffocating potential death sentence. Here is the morbid sequence of how this struggle plays out. First, that chaotic mating ball forms, completely trapping the female beneath a pile of frantic males. Next, heavily weighed down beneath the water's surface, the female faces a severe and immediate risk of being crushed or just outright drowned. To survive this onslaught, she relies on a brilliant but deeply dark defense mechanism, tonic immobility. The female stiffens her entire body, literally feigning death in a desperate psychological attempt to trick the aggressive males into releasing her. It is a very literal, high-stakes game of play dead or actually die. And finally, Section 6, the ultimate cost of survival, summarizing this evolutionary arms race. We've covered a lot of ground today, so let's pull back to the macro view and summarize what all of these incredibly different animals teach us about the true nature of evolutionary pressures. This brilliantly illustrates our whole explainer in one cheat sheet. From the spiny genitalia of the seed beetle causing females to evolve thicker tracts to the bedbug's piercing paramere requiring a highly specialized trauma organ, we saw gray seals using overpowering size, resulting in fatal lacerations, Lake Eyre dragons using biting coercion, met with a desperate orange belly flip, and finally, the common frog's chaotic mating ball, forcing females into tonic immobility. Scent and pheromones might initially bring these animals together, but this biological arms race makes it an incredibly dangerous, high-stakes gamble. Which leads us to this vital takeaway. Evolution isn't always about harmony. Sometimes it's a brutal race, where the prize is survival and the cost is everything. Nature doesn't inherently prioritize peaceful coexistence or comfort, right? It strictly prioritizes survival and passing on genes to the next generation, even if the methods required to do so are inherently destructive and violent to the species itself. So, I'll leave you with this final, lingering thought to consider.
If something as fundamental and seemingly positive as reproduction can be this aggressively disruptive, what other hidden biological wars are happening right under our noses? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and as always, stay curious.